Good morning, and thank you for joining us for today's Business Support Series webinar, episode 23. Seemed like we just started these, but I'm Mike Neal, President and CEO of the Tulsa Regional Chamber. Our Chamber's Business Support Series offers insights on how your organization can effectively respond to the COVID-19 pandemic, and more importantly today, how you can begin to emerge from that and return to business. If there's an area where our Chamber team can be of assistance to your company, please let us know. Yesterday, we really entered phase 3 of Oklahoma's reopening plan. Today, we'll hear from a large corporation and a small business about their decision-making processes as they've reopened, as well as lessons they've learned along the way. But before we discuss the topic in more detail with our speakers, I'd like to thank the sponsors of our Business Support Series. See them listed at the bottom of your screen. Luxa Enterprises, Stennett Associates, Security Bank, and Matrix Force. And speaking of Matrix Force, we're honored today to have with us Kevin Freem, Chief Executive Officer of Matrix Force, to introduce today's speakers. Kevin, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Mike. It's an honor to join everyone today and to introduce our speakers. Marilyn Ihloff is founder and president of Ihloff Salon and Day Spa. She opened the business in 1980 and has grown it into multiple locations with 125 team members. From 1998 to 2016, Ihloff Salon and Day Spa was named one of the 200 fastest growing salons in the nation by Salon Today. Ihloff Salons and Day Spas are also regularly voted Best of Tulsa by local publications such as the Tulsa World, Tulsa People, Oklahoma Magazine, and Tulsa Kids. Bruce Heine is Vice President of Government Affairs for Magellan Midstream Partners. Bruce assumed his current role in April of 2017 and was previously Director of Government Affairs for Williams Energy Services, which became Magellan Midstream in 2003. Heine joined Williams in 1999 as Senior Manager of Government Affairs assigned to Petroleum Services, Exploration, Production, and Midstream business units. Thank you both for joining us today. Marilyn, we'll start with you.
Thanks, Kevin, and thanks for having me. We decided to close our doors on Thursday, March 19th, and furlough our 118 employees. The thought process began the first of that week with the wave of cancellations and complete loss of traffic in the locations. Phones were silent. We'd been in business 40 years, but operate like many small businesses with small margins and not enough cash reserves. On March 18th, I had a pretty tearful meeting with my senior managers, and the decision was made to do this furlough, thinking, probably a couple of weeks. We received 100% approval from the whole team, and we spent lots of time that week helping the team navigate the unemployment process. I spent the rest of my time in those first days in front of the television watching the progress of the pandemic, and one day it dawned on me that this was going to last a lot longer than those 2 weeks. When the CARES Act was passed, I worked through my community bank and my banker of 35 years, Lou Erickson, and received PPP funding. Throughout all this, I'm so grateful for my senior furloughed managers that volunteered their time to work with me to keep our company in business and get ready to reopen. Also, the Tulsa Community Network of support, including the chamber and the local leaders, especially the mayor, other local salons, and other small business owners. Nationally, my network of salon owners and our industry trade association have been great people to bounce off of and to guide. So we manage our small business by dividing our calendar into 8 seasons each year for the short strategic stuff. And in each of those seasons, we divide strategies under 5 functions of operations, marketing, education, HR, and finance. Well, operations were pretty silent during the closure. And marketing, we focused on connecting to both the team individually to be sure they were all right, and to our salon guests, asking them to wait for us and show off their roots. Education, we worked with our distributor to to provide online technical and business education for our team to access while they were at home, should they want to. And then HR worked with the marketing team during that time until it got to the rehire time, and then they were doing a lot of scheduling. Finance worked on the PPP and how to use it in the best ways. Lots of time on Zoom and industry webinar. I really turned into a professional Zoom attendee and industry webinar attendee during those days. I also continued to work with our CPA and banker as we were getting ready to receive the PPP funds. I was completely blindsided on April 22nd when Governor Stitt announced that the state would begin the reopening on April 24th, and the first phase would be personal services. We touch people. I figured we'd be way down on that onion peel. So I'm really thankful for our level-headed mayor who kept the shelter in place through April 30th. Many salon owners opened May 1st when Tulsa was able to, but we felt our 3 locations are larger, and we felt to get protocols, staffing, and the PPE in place, we would wait until May 11th. We also received our PPP funds April 24th and began a gradual rehire, beginning with our management team and call center, followed by our senior technical team. By the middle of June, we should have everyone back on staff to meet the guidelines. A big blessing was demand for our services and retail was pent up and it was high. We're grateful for that, but we had to accommodate diminished capacity, and especially the first week we were open and getting up to speed with this. We ramped up our marketing with our "Safety is the New Luxury" tagline and begged people for patience. On May 11th, we opened up. We had with our safety protocols. When you come to our salons, you'll have your temperature checked at the front door. Everyone is required to wear a mask with both employees and customers. There are no beverages. There are no beverage stations. There's no magazines, and we do not have a waiting room. People are called in when it's time for them to go to their appointment. There are hand sanitizing stations and also hand washing stations. While we cannot physically distance a service provider from a guest, we have removed styling chairs, so the styling chairs are physically distanced and at least 6 feet apart. We added hours and we added shifts to increase our capacity to do all this. And because of the close physical contact in our business, we are continuing the same protocols through even phase 3. We've gotten new customers through these protocols, and our team gives us feedback that they also feel safe, which is a huge priority for us. Finally, we're grateful to have made it to this point, and we have our fingers crossed for a mild second wave and speedy advances in testing and vaccinations. Thank you.
Thank you, Marilyn. Bruce, I think you're still muted.
Good morning, Mike and Marilyn and Kevin, and thanks for the opportunity for Magellan to participate this morning. It's a privilege for us to be able to share a little bit about our business and how we've managed our operations and our commercial teams and other parts of our business through this pandemic. Our story will be a little different than Marilyn's, and I thought she did a terrific job in giving a very thorough overview. Let me start for those that may not be familiar with Magellan, that are either listening in or viewing in, and we're not often a household name, although here in Tulsa we are more known than other communities around the country that we serve. This is an image of our pipeline map. The green line on the map shows our refined petroleum products map. Refined petroleum products, essentially various grades of gasoline, diesel fuel, and jet fuel that we transport from refineries to the dots that you see on the map, which are petroleum distribution terminals. And we have more than 80 terminals throughout a number of states that we serve, both in the Midwest and the Eastern Seaboard. The pipeline system, the Magellan pipeline system, serves 15 states throughout the middle of the country. You also see some red lines there, which are our crude oil operations, with some large pipelines that we operate in the state of Texas, and one very important dot right in the middle of Oklahoma in Cushing, where Magellan has some 13 million barrels of storage in Cushing. So where our story differs from Marilyn a little bit is in regards to the service that we provide for our neighbors, our families, and others in the communities that we serve. And that is when most Americans pull into their retail station, convenience store of their choice, they really don't stop to think about a role that pipelines may play in ensuring that you've got adequate supplies of gasoline and diesel fuel to meet your needs. And pipelines play a huge role in that. And here in Tulsa, we're very fortunate. Our community is very fortunate from the standpoint that we have the Magellan pipeline system. There's another pipeline system that serves the Tulsa community as well, and our refineries in the state, in Wynnewood and Ardmore and Ponca City, and here in our community in Tulsa. And the Magellan pipeline system is connected to all of those, as well as all the refineries down in the Houston area and the ship channel in Texas City. So we have an abundance of supply options here in Tulsa, which makes sure that when you pull into your favorite convenience store to fill up with a full tank of freedom, that we played a role in getting that fuel there. In Oklahoma, Magellan provides services for approximately 45% of every gallon of gasoline, diesel fuel, and jet fuel that's consumed in our state. Here locally, Tulsa is our headquarters. We operate in 2 buildings. I'm in the Williams Tower today, which is the home of many Magellan administrative employees and our senior leadership. And then we also operate a couple of floors over in the One Technology Center, which is also known as City Hall. So collectively, we have about 850 employees here in Tulsa and more than 1,800 system-wide that operate our facilities. So where we differ from the story you heard with Marilyn is that there were segments of our economy that continued to operate during the beginning phases of the pandemic. And Morgan, you can take the slide down whenever you're ready. So during that process, it was really important that our operations continued to flow as normal. And that meant that the men and women that we have in the field in West Tulsa, and we have facilities down in Glenpool and throughout Oklahoma City and Enid, Oklahoma, as well as many other communities that we serve from Texas through the Dakotas, west to Wyoming and east to Chicago, that all of those men and women continue to go to their locations in the field, turn valves, operate pipelines, and continue to see that trucks are loaded with 8,000 gallons of gasoline or diesel fuel that then go to the retail establishments that you and I patronize every day to buy our gasoline and diesel fuel. So those operations were essential to continue, and we did. The field personnel that Magellan has performed at exceptionally high levels, and we're able to do so using protocols that we put in place here throughout the company. And those protocols were primarily following the CDC and other applicable guidelines to help keep us safe as we operated our systems. If the system didn't operate, if we weren't able to transport gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel to where it was produced, to where it was consumed, the same with crude oil, then the magnitude of the markets that we serve in the Midwest would have created a national emergency. As you can imagine, some of you with gray hair like me have lived through a number of different events in the United States where we didn't have adequate supplies of gasoline, diesel. And some of those date back into the 1970s during oil embargoes. But there's one way to really create havoc in our society, and that is to run out of fuel that is essential for keeping our economy going. So the good news is the pipeline system was able to continue operating in a fashion that kept America moving to the extent that it was able during the early stages of the pandemic. Related to how we managed our operations, similar to the story that Marilyn told you and how she worked through the challenges of operating her business. For us, one of the first things we did was to establish an internal team that really represented each segment of our business, our commercial operations team, risk management, human resources, government affairs, and others, including our asset integrity groups and more, are contributing in a team to make sure that all of the different voices of the company are heard as it relates to the first and second steps that we're taking to bring our employees back to work in the administrative functions of our operation. And having a very talented human resources vice president running that group, we were able to essentially start the communication process with our employees, getting them ready through a different phased-in process of bringing them back to work. So the initial stages, the phase one stage, if you will, we really, through our IT group, they did an amazing job of equipping all of our employees, whether they were administrative staff or leadership staff, with laptops and the ability to work from home using the necessary equipment to keep the business functioning in a manner that was essential to keep our customers happy and to meet the needs of the community in providing adequate supplies of fuel. So once we started to move into phase two in mid-May, the phased-in approach that we had implemented essentially brought our supervisors and above back in the office 2 to 3 days a week. So that was the process that we used. I know a number of different companies in the energy industry had options of how you do that. What we chose to do was supervisors and above 2 to 3 days a week. That's what worked best for Magellan. Won't probably fit every application, but it worked well for us. And as we continue to move towards the next phase that Mike mentioned, the phase three that the governor has now and the mayor have put us towards phase three as of yesterday, we're going to continue to work with our employees to bring them back in a manner that's comfortable and conservative, but focuses on our goal and objective, which is to manage our business in an optimal way during this pandemic. And the best way that we can do that is to continue taking steps to bring our employees back into the main offices that we operate here at our headquarters in Tulsa. So we've paid very close attention to the CDC guidelines, very close attention to other applicable regulations that we need to comply with and exceed expectations to do our best to keep everybody safe and to bring them back as comfortably as possible to where we can operate our business in the most optimum way possible. So Mike, let me stop at that. I'm looking forward to any additional questions that you may have.
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Marilyn. You guys gave some really, really valuable, extremely helpful experiences and perspectives that your respective organizations have gone through these past few months. So thank you for sharing that. We do not have time to take live questions from our audience today. We have a number of questions that were submitted in advance. And the first one I'll lead off with is for both of our panelists, and that is, once employees started to return to work, did you experience any unprecedented challenges? And if so, could you explain what those challenges were? Marilyn, we'll start with you.
You know, the one that stands out, and this would be a definite situation for small businesses, was I never saw anything roll out as fast in my life with our government as the CARES Act. And it was, for a one-size-fits-all cure, is pretty darn brilliant. In that, you know, the PPP requires you to get your entire team back by June 30th. That's one of the, well, I think that's about to change. But anyway, that's where it has been. Along with that, the unemployment situation added $600 a week to everyone's weekly unemployment, which in Oklahoma gave a lot of our frontline hourly team a better deal on the unemployment, and that goes till July 31st. So there was some resistance into coming back, and that's why we're putting off team for a while to come back. But you know, the way that stops at June 30th versus the June 31st deadline for the lasting for the unemployment has made a bit of a conflict and has caused us to have to kind of diplomatically maneuver around that, and it's unfortunate.
And that's something, Marilyn, that we've heard a tremendous amount about from your fellow small business connect board members.
Right.
That's such an.
I mean, it just unintended consequence.
Yeah, absolutely. Bruce, let's go to you.
Thank you, Mike. Well, as it related to federal assistance, our industry had looked at what, and I say our industry, the energy industry at large, including the exploration and production companies that are here in our great state and elsewhere in the country, had looked to see if there were multiple things that could be done to help. There were discussions about proration, in other words, limiting the production of oil. There were discussions about the Strategic Petroleum Reserve and allowing the appropriation of funds from the federal government to purchase oil during the time of need for the producers. And thankfully, markets have recovered since that point in time. But generally, there were some funding assistance available to some in the production industry, but large companies like Magellan in the midstream sector, we were really focused on meeting the needs of our customers, which we have done during this pandemic. The challenges that we have found to be helpful to us and to be overcome is really going back to the objective that we have, and that is to manage our business from an optimal standpoint, and then to focus on the objectives of getting there as quickly as possible. So for us versus Marilyn's story of looking at the CARES Act and looking at the complications of that from a smaller business perspective, we were focused on the big picture of making sure that adequate supplies were in place at all time to meet the needs of our customers. And this included, during the pandemic, a challenge to where planting season in the Midwest, just north of Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, for example, corn and soybean planting seasons have huge demands for diesel fuel during that very narrow time frame. And we met all those needs with minimal challenges to our overall system. So the farmers were happy. The governments in those states, the governors specifically, were pleased with us. And I would tell you that we did face some objectives and some challenges, but none of those were insurmountable. And we addressed them all head on through this team that I mentioned to you in a way to be as productive as possible.
Good. Thank you, Bruce. Next question. We're getting a little short on time, so I'd like you, maybe if you could try to answer the next question in about 30 seconds each, if you could. And that really has to do with, as we begin phase 3 of the reopening, there are fewer restrictions, obviously, for businesses and customers as we've discussed today. But obviously, health and safety continues to be a top concern for all of us. So how are you building trust among your customers and clients in regard to their health and safety? Marilyn?
We are not changing anything with phase 3, just because of the nature of our business is touch. And we're building trust by advertising that. Safety's the new luxury, and come here for that. And it's gotten us new guests. So yes, that's how we're doing it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Marilyn. Bruce?
And from our perspective, Mike, our customers and how we deal with them is very different than Marilyn's example in a small business. But I'd really like to address that from the perspective of our employees, the additional measures that we're putting in place, of course, for social distancing and hygiene reminders and things of that nature. There are a variety of other measures that we're putting in place to try to protect all those that make their livelihoods here at Magellan Midstream. And that's really where we're most affected by moving into phase 3. And as mentioned, we're trying to do that as optimal as possible to bring our employees back into a safe and a good, positive working environment.
One more question for me, and I'm going to go to Kevin, and then super quick responses here as well. What's been the most common question or feedback you've heard from your employees as you've now brought them back?
Definitely the most common feedback from our employees has been, these masks are driving us crazy, but we're grateful for the safety that they provide.
Great. Bruce?
From our perspective, Mike, we get a lot of feedback from our employees that they're appreciative of the phased-in approach that we've implemented here at Magellan, the flexibility that we've provided for our employees to continue to work from home under the need to meet the needs that they have, the family needs, their health needs, that have been created through the pandemic, and the flexible opportunities to work remotely as we move forward if that's something that's necessary.
Bruce, from your headquarters staff, what percent of your, in the two buildings, from basically headquarters staff, what percent of them are back in the office today, working in the building?
We're around 25% that's growing constantly, Mike.
What's your timeline? When do you think they'll be fully back in? When would you anticipate?
We're in the process of finalizing our guidelines for phase 3, and we'll be distributing those out to our entire team here in the very near future with the hope to get everybody back in fairly quickly.
Right. Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Marilyn. Now let's go to our esteemed sponsor, Kevin Freem, for our final question. Kevin?
Mike, thank you. And thank you all again for speaking. What is your biggest piece of advice you would give for businesses that are just reopening?
Well, for us, for me, and for small business is start as early as you can. And remember that shipments are taking longer than they expect, especially on the PPE stuff. Getting those thermometers were a real squeaker for us. So as early as you can, and communicate, over communicate with your team and your customers.
Thank you, Mike. And for Magellan, one of the biggest takeaways is the need to create an internal team managed by a very competent leader to make sure that all segments of the business are heard and that the employees that work in those respective groups have a voice and that's taken seriously during decision making.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Bruce. Marilyn, in response to your last response there, we've been working with the Tulsa County to order PPE for part of their federal CARES Act funding that we're hoping to distribute to small businesses in the county. And we've been amazed at how long it's taken for those orders to come in and to get that PPE in. That's a really valuable point that you made there. But let me say again, thanks so very much to Marilyn, to Bruce, and to Kevin for joining us today. Again, I'd like to thank our sponsors at the bottom of your screen, Luxa Enterprises, Matrix Force, Security Bank, and Stinnett for their support of this ongoing series. As we said before, this is episode 23. This series has been going for a while. Anyone who came in late or called in by phone or would like to share this webinar or recording will be posted on the Chamber's website later today. So please feel free to share it with any of your colleagues, associates, etc. Also, for our next business support series webinar this Thursday, June the 4th at 11 a.m., we're going to shift from COVID-19. We will be joined by Carl Newmeyer, one of Maryland's fellow Chamber board members, who is the Chief Operating Officer at Hilti North America, and our Chamber's own Kuma Roberts, our Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, for a 30-minute discussion about how employees can have tough conversations with their employees about current affairs and sensitive subjects. Obviously, we as a community have been through much, as has the rest of the country over the past week. So we think this will be a very timely conversation and hopefully can provide some very valuable information that businesses of all sizes can use in having internal communication within their respective workforces with their employees. You can register for this and all of our upcoming virtual events on tulsachamber.com/events. And please note that advanced registration is required for all of our safety and security. So please don't hesitate again, as I mentioned earlier, to reach out to Chamber staff, reach out to me personally if we can be of assistance to you or your company or your business as we progress through the recovery phases of this pandemic. Again, thank you all for joining us. Thanks again to Bruce and Marilyn and Kevin for a great job today. As always, please don't hesitate to call us again. Have a great Tuesday afternoon and a great rest of the week. Thank you all.